Chapter 2 Varg Varg twisted to look back over his shoulders as he ran, stumbled, almost fell, and carried on running. The rocky banks were giving way to black sand and shingle as the river widened. The dense trees and cliffs that had hemmed him in, thinning and retreating as he drew closer to the fjord. Already he could smell the market town of Liga, a host of scents and sounds assaulting his senses. Another look back over his shoulder. No signs of pursuit, but he knew they were there. He increased his pace. How long have I been running? 9 days? 10? He touched a hand to the leather pouch at his belt, sucked in the salt-tinged air and ran on. His legs burned, lungs heaved, and sweat trickled in a constant stream into his eyes. But he kept his pace, deep breaths, long strides. I could run forever if only there were ground before me for my feet to tread. But the cliffs have steered me into the sea, and it is close. Where will I go? What should I do? Panic fluttered through his veins. They must not catch me. He ran on, shingle crunching beneath his tattered turn shoes. The river spilled into a fjord, widening like a serpent's jaws about its prey, and Liga came into view. A market town and port built up on the fjord's southeastern banks. Varg slowed to a stop, put his hands on his knees, and stared at the town, a bustling, stinking mass of buildings strewn along a wide, black-sanded beach, and rolling back as far as the slopes of the fjord would allow. A stockade wall ringed the town, protecting the buildings and humanity crammed within. The town climbed the flank of a slope, a grass-turfed long hall with carved curling wooden beams, built on the high ground, like a jarl in the high seat of a mead hall, looking out over his people. The sky above was thick with hearth smoke, the stink of grease and fat heavy in the air. Jetties and piers jutted out over the blue-black water of the fjord. A myriad ships rocking gently at harbor. One ship stood out among the others. A prow-necked, sleek-sided Drakkar, a dragon ship, looking like a wolf of the sea among a flock of sheep. All around it crowded slender birdings and a host of knarrs, their bellies fat with merchant wares from places Varg had no doubt never heard of. He did not even know how old he was, but in his remembered life he had counted 30 hard winters and back-breaking summers that he had spent shackled to Kolskeg's farm, only 20 leagues northeast along the river. And in all of those years, his master had never taken him to Liga on one of his many trading trips. Not that he wanted to go, the smells repulsed him, though the blending scent of fat and cooking meat were making his belly rumble, and the thought of being so close to so many people was incomprehensible to him. He took a few unconscious steps away, back towards the river gully he had been running through. But I cannot go back. They will catch me. I have to go forwards. I need a Galderman, a Siderovich. He rubbed his stubble beard and he reached inside his cloak, pulling out a thick iron collar. Another search inside his cloak pocket and he drew out a key, unlocked the collar and with a shiver set the cold iron around his neck, snapping it shut. He locked it and put the key back in his cloak, For a few moments he stood and twisted his neck, grimaced, a shuddering breath. Then he stood straight, brushed down his mud-stained tunic and pulled his woolen cloak hood up over his head, and walked on. A wide ruined carved gate stood open. Two mail-coated guards, leaning against one post, one greybeard who sat upon a stump, and a younger woman, dark hair braided tight, a sea axe hanging from the front of her belt, a spear in one fist. She eyed Varg as he approached, then stepped forward, barring his way. Your business in Liga, he said. Finding rooms for my master, Varg said, his eyes downcast. I have been ordered on ahead. He gestured vaguely behind him, into the river valley. The guard looked him up and down, then over his shoulder at the empty mouth of the river valley. How do I know that? Who's your master? Pull your hood down. Varg thought about the answers he could give, and where they would lead, and what they would give away. Slowly he pushed his hood back, revealing his stubbled hair, his mud and sweat-stained face. He opened his mouth. A cart rolled up behind him, pulled by two oxen. A fine-dressed merchant sat upon the driving bench, a handful of freedmen with spears and clubs in their fists. Let the man through, Slida, the greybeard grunted from his stump. My master is Snepil, Varg said, saying the first name that came into his head. Snepil was a man that he knew would not be following him soon. As the last time Varg had seen him, Snepil's eyes had been bulging and his last breath had hissed and rattled from his throat as Varg throttled the life from him. He couldn't remember how he came to have his hands around the man's throat, only remembered blinking as Snepil's rattling death filtered through some red mists in Varg's head. She eyed him one more time, then stepped out of his way and weaved him through. Varg pulled his hood back and slipped into Liga like lice into a beard, the scents and sounds hitting him as if he had dived into water. Timber-sided buildings lined wide, mud-slicked streets, and traders were everywhere, clamoring, their trestle benches edging the streets and laid out with all manner of goods. Bolt of dyed cloth, bone, needles and combs, axe heads, knives, fine-tooled scabbards, bronze cloak pins and amulets, wooden bowls, bundles of linen and wool, tied bales of wolf and bear skins, reindeer hides, pine marten and fox pelts. Varg's eyes widened at the sight of walrus tusks and ivory. Others were selling horns of mead and ale, bubbling pots of rabbit and beef stew steaming over pit fires, turnips and carrots bobbing, fat glistening, quartered steaks of whale meat, smoked herring and cod hanging. He even saw a trader selling Vaesen body parts, Faunir's dried blood, a troll's tooth, big as a fist, a bowl full of Skraeling eyeballs, and a necklace made from the needled hair of a Froa spirit. It was endless and overwhelming. A spasm in his belly reminded him that a long time had passed since he'd last eaten. He was not sure exactly how long, but it was at least 3 days ago, or was it 4, when he had been lucky enough to snatch a salmon from the river. He strode over to a trader who was standing behind a big stew pot and using a cleaver to quarter a boar's leg joint. The trader was a broad-bellied and wispy-bearded man wearing fur-trimmed boots and a fine green woolen tunic, though the tablet weaving around the neck and cuffs was dull and frayed. Varg stared into the pot of stew, saliva flooding his mouth, the churning and twisting in his gut abruptly painful. Something to warm your belly, the trader said, putting the cleaver down and lifting a bowl. Aye, that'd be good, Varg said. A half bronze, the trader said, then paused and stared at Varg. He put the bowl down and pushed Varg's hood back, looked at his short, stubbled hair. His eyes narrowed. Away with you, you dirty thrall, the trader scowled. I can pay, Varg said. A raised eyebrow. I'll see your coin first, the trader said. Varg reached inside his cloak, pulled out the pouch, loosened the leather drawer, and fished out a bronze coin. He dropped it on the trader's table, the coin rolling and falling, revealing the stamped profile of a woman's head. A sharp-nosed profile, hair pulled severely tight and braided at the neck. A Helka, the trader said, his beard twitching. Queen Helka, Varg said. Though he had never seen her, only heard snatched talk of her hubris, thinking she could rule and control half of Vigdrid, and of her ruthlessness against her enemies. Only calls herself queen so she can tax us down here to our stones, the trader grunted. No good to you then, Varg said, reaching for the coin. I didn't say that, the trader said, holding a hand out. Faster than it took to blink, Varg snatched up the cleaver the trader had put down and chopped at the coin, hacking it in two. He lifted one half up between his finger and thumb, left the other back bronze on the table. Where the dirty thrall come by a pouch of Helka coin, anyway? And where's your master? The trader grunted, eyeing him. Varg looked at him, then slowly put a hand out toward the coin again. The trader shrugged and scooped a ladle of stew into the bowl, handed it to Varg. Some of that bread too, Varg said, and the trader cut a chunk from a black-crusted loaf. Varg dipped the bread in the stew and sucked it, fat dripping down his chin, into his newly grown beard. The stew was watery and too hot, but it tasted like pure joy to Varg. He closed his eyes, dipped, sucked, slurped until the bread was gone, then appended what was left of the stew into his mouth. He put the bowl down and belched. I've seen hungry men before, the trader said. But you. He whistled and gave a half smile. Is there a Galdriman or Siderovich in Liga? Varg asked, cuffing stew from his chin. The trader signed a rune across his chest and frowned. No. And what do you want with the likes of them? That's my business, Varg said, then paused. That's my master's business. Do you know where I can find one? The trader began to turn away. Varg put the other half bronze back on the table. The trader looked at him appraisingly. The Bloodsworn docked yesterday. They have a Siderwich troll. The Bloodsworn? The Bloodsworn were famed throughout the whole of Vigrid and most likely beyond. A band of mercenary warriors who hired themselves out to the highest bidder. They hunted down Vaesen monsters, searched out god relics for wealthy jarls, fought in border disputes, guarded the wealthy and powerful. Tales were sung about them by skalds around hearth fires. Where are they? Varg said. You'll find them in Liga's longhouse, guests of Jarl Logur. My thanks, Varg said. Then he dipped his hands back in his pouch and threw another hack bronze on the table. What's that for? The trader said. Your silence. You never saw me. Saw who? Said the trader, looking around